And welcome to Citizen Extra. It is Monday, the 20th day of November 2017. My name is Wahiga Mwaura. Now, sections of the nation's capital, Nairobi, have been tense over the last 36 hours after a day of violent protests following the killing of 5 people on Saturday night in Babandogo. Police said they were treating the killings as criminal acts and not ethnic clashes. But with the country on edge over heated politics, few are making the distinction between the two. But that is not the only big talking point across the country this morning. All eyes are on the Supreme Court today. The constitutional deadline for the court to deliver its judgment on the petition by civil society activists John Jomue and Helef Khalifa, and a second petition by former Kilome Member of Parliament Harun Mwao, both of which are seeking to have the October 26 rerun nullified. The question now is how will the Supreme Court decide on the petitions, and how whatever decision it makes will affect the overall political situation in the country. Whatever decision the court makes later today will have implications for its own legitimacy as well, and therefore its ability to continue being seen as a credible player in the unfolding crisis. The court is expected to deliver its judgment before noon, actually at 10 a.m. That's in about 40 minutes or so. A judgment that will not just be legal in nature, but one that will guide the political future of this country. That's why we're asking you today, what are your expectations from the Supreme Court? What do you hope to hear from that 6-judge bench in the next 40 minutes or so? Talk to us on 22422. Let us know your thoughts. Use the hashtag CitizenExtra on social media. At Citizen TV Kenya are the respective handles on Twitter and Facebook as well, and I'll be sampling some of your feedback throughout the course of this show. Well, we are live from different parts of the country. We are live from the Supreme Court. Sam Gituku is on standby. We are live in Nyeri. Martin Munene is on standby. We are live in Eldoret, Uasin Gishu County, where John Wanyama is on standby. We'll also be getting updates from Kisumu County, Laura Otieno, and even Mombasa County, where Asha Beki Dosa will be giving us an update. We're also following the security situation in the nation's capital. Hassan Mugambi is in Githurai, where we have had some disturbing reports throughout the course of the night, and we'll be talking to Hassan Mugambi to clarify what is true and what is not in just a bit. But first things first, let's start at the Supreme Court, where Sam Gituku is on standby. Sam, a weighty judgment that the six-judge bench is expected to deliver in the next 40 minutes or so. Many say that by the time the judgment is done, we expect a clear definition on what a fresh election looks like, and also on the implication of the withdrawal of NASA leader Raila Odinga. What can you tell us about what we should expect to hear from the court today? And of course, who's arrived at this moment? Who can you see making their way in?
Well, good morning, Wahiga. We have seen several lawyers making their way into the courtroom. For instance, from the side of the interested party, in this case, that is Dr. Ekuru Okot. He just made his way into the courtroom. And as you said, yes, we're about now 36 minutes before that court session can begin, for the judges to get that opportunity to deliver to the country what they think should be the way forward in terms of the presidential election that was held on the October 26th. But as you would imagine, like it happened in the August election and the Supreme Court decision that followed, the security around the Supreme Court has been taken care of by several security officers. But if you compare this situation and what we had the other time, it's sort of different, bearing in mind that this case has not attracted a lot of attention, especially from the political class, because of course last time in August the main petitioner, or rather the petitioner, was the National Super Alliance candidate, that is Raila Odinga and Kalonzo Musyoka as the running mate. But this time round it is the two petitions that are by John Jomue and Helef Khalifa, who are civil society activists, and also Harun Mwao, the former member of Parliament for Kilome. So it has not attracted as much political interest as you would expect. But that aside, there are still security officers trying to barricade the roads around this area, that is the City Hall way, Wabera Street. Of course, the barricades are there, but of course the road is open for the public who are walking through, maybe going to Kencom area or going to the other side of the town. But for the motorists, this is a no-go zone. But the expectation is that as soon as the judges make their way into the courtroom, then of course we'll expect the situation to remain calm, and as far as the security officers are concerned, manning the situation, bearing in mind that after they give the outcome, that is when you may expect there to be a change, depending on the kind of expectation that the different sides of the petition have. But so far you've seen some people have tried to come and color the area around the Supreme Court, talking about the candidature of Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto, the deputy president. You've seen some placards that have been put here by some of the Nairobi leaders, just indicating the expectations, hoping that the case will be, the presidential election will be upheld by the judges. But of course, that is just an expectation. As you can see from your camera, you can see now the security officers, the barricades that I was talking about, making sure that no motorists are able to make their way through. If at all they do not have their pass or they are not accredited, they are not allowed to access the courtroom. But even those people who may be allowed to have their vehicles coming through the Supreme Court area, they have just to drop and then move away and go look for parking elsewhere. But as I was saying, Wahiga, is that the expectation, you compare it to what we had in August, is completely different. Because of that particular situation and the nature of the petitions. But I'm not alone. I am with my colleague Francis Gashuru, who is near the courtroom, near the court entrance at the Supreme Court. He has also been following the people who've been making their way into the courtroom and also giving us some expectations from the lawyers who have made their way to the courtroom. Francis, if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you, Sam Gituku. Yes, quite a number of legal practitioners are already here, just waiting, excuse me, just waiting for the few minutes before the court session can kick off. The session is supposed to kick off at 10 a.m. Hopefully it's 10 a.m., real 10 a.m., and not what we saw during the oral submissions when the court was a bit late for a few more minutes. But yes, Chief Justice David Maraga was here, and we saw him. So I can confirm with authority that the country's top judge and the president of the Supreme Court is within the courtroom, and so are quite a number of other lawyers. And we also saw one of the interested parties in the petition, that is the Dr. Ekuru Okot, who vied on a third way alliance ticket, is also here. Quite a number of lawyers making their way into the courtroom. But of course, some of importance is that the judges, whichever way they rule, they will also be seeking to answer specific questions that were posed by the petitioners. Number one, what is a fresh presidential election? What constitutes a fresh presidential election? And number two, should that fresh presidential election have been preceded by fresh nominations for the candidates who are in the race? And thirdly, if a candidate withdraws from the race a few days to the polls, does it invalidate the poll? Does it call for the cancellation of the election and a fresh exercise conducted? Bearing in mind that those were the three issues at the heart of the petition filed by John Harun Mau. But at the same time, those issues still came up in the petition filed by Hele Khalifa and John Jomwe, although they still added a few more issues, including, number one, whether Article 138 sub Article 2 of the Constitution was followed to the letter. That is a presidential election where more than one contestant is in the race. Then that election should be held in each of the constituencies, bearing in mind that we have 290 constituencies, but we also have two extra, that is the prison and the voters in the prison, as well as those in the people in the diaspora. And now that the election was not conducted in at least 25 constituencies in Kisumu, Siaya, Migori and Homa Bay counties, does that invalidate the election? Was the law followed strictly and to the letter? And also, Hele Khalifa and John Jomwe seek answers from the Supreme Court judges on whether the election was conducted in strict compliance with the Constitution and the applicable election laws. Those are the specific, let's say, 5 questions or so that the judges will be seeking to answer in this petition as they give their judgment today. And of course, that judgment will determine if President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy William Ruto will be sworn into office for the second term, that is on the 28th of this month, or Kenyans will return to the ballot for the third time in 6 months, that is mid-January. So that's the judgment we're waiting to hear from the judges. It remains unclear how they will do it, whether they will read it in turns or whether they will have one judgment, whether there will be separate judgments. So basically, let's keep an eye and wait to see how the situation will unfold in the next 30 minutes or so, Sam.
Right, and Higa, as you hear Gashuri talking about, it's not clear whether they'll have one judgment or different judgments. That is the essence of will it be a unanimous decision? Are the judges this time round going to agree that on the positions, the various positions that Gashuri has enumerated, are they going to have one judgment, or are they going to have dissenting opinions, as we had in the August decision that is on the 1st of September, when Justices Joaquin Ndungu and Professor Jackton Ojwang had their dissenting opinions, which they went out to enumerate individually, and then the other 4 judges, as the majority, had their time reading in turns, reading their judgment in turn. So the expectation We may have, but what you expect, what you have to wait and see is as 10 o'clock this morning to hear from the judges whether they have a unanimous decision, whether they have a majority decision, or maybe it's a tie where they will be voting 3-3, and of course that would mean that the status quo remains, and that is to mean that the IEBC declaration of Uhuru Kenyatta as the president-elect will have remained. Wahiga?
Sam Gituku, thank you so much for that. 3 ways in which the vote could go: unanimous decision, majority decision, or a tie. But there are those who also feel that the judgment could also go in 3 ways. One way is that, Sam, I hope you can still hear me. One way is that the court would agree with the petitioners and annul the October 26 poll. That's the first one. Or they could throw out the petition so that the president would be sworn in probably next week, Tuesday. That's 7 days after the verdict. Or they could uphold the presidential election victory but note concerns with the process or any anomalies. Do you agree with those who feel that those are the 3 ways in which the court could go?
Well, it's true. When you said that they could rule by majority, that is to mean majority whether to uphold the election, and if you uphold the election, then you are dismissing the petitions. Or you may be by majority to nullify the election, in which case it would mean that the country has to return to the ballot, and that is by 19th of January. Yes, the other option of, or if they uphold, then you do their swearing in, which should be on the 20th of November, the first Tuesday, after 7 days after the judgment, which is today. So you're talking about today is Monday, it's 20th. 7 days from now is 27th. So the first Tuesday after 27th will be the 20th, which is the day after 27th. So those are the expectations. As of maybe 10:30 or thereafter, we will have a clear indication on where the country will be proceeding to. Wahiga.
Thank you so much, Sam Gituku, for that update. 27 minutes and counting to the judgment by the Supreme Court. We just have to wait and see. Sam Gituku, Francis Gashuri will be giving us all updates from just outside the Supreme Court, and so we'll be crossing back to them in just a bit. But for now, let's get reactions from different parts of the country. We start in Eldoret, Uasin Gishu County, where John Wanyama is on standby. John, what are Uasin Gishu residents saying even as they await that judgment? What's the latest? Kindly give us an update.
A very good morning to you, Maura, and here in Uasin Gishu County, as you've said, specifically where I am is in Eldoret town. This is a big day. The residents are waiting, and it has been a long wait, but we are only counting now a few hours or a few minutes just to go for this big ruling of the court. And Wahiga, this case, unlike the other one, the one that was in Supreme Court the other time before this one, is that Kenyans, especially when it was the time of proceedings, Kenyans really didn't have that much interest in following up the proceedings, unlike the other one before. So today, Maura, residents are only waiting to see what will be happening in the courts, and their only prayer is that the ruling will be fair. And behind me, Maura, is a very big screen that has been put here by the county government of Uasin Gishu, just to ensure that residents here can have an opportunity to come, those who are maybe not going to a hotel, so that they can come and do a following up here, so that they don't miss on anything that is happening, especially there in Nairobi in the Supreme Court. And we are also informed that the Uasin Gishu Governor Jackson Mandako plus other member of parliaments will be also here just next to this big screen behind me, to ensure also they watch and make a close follow-up on what the judges will be making their ruling today in the Supreme Court. So generally, Maura, everyone here is anxious, and people are just waiting to see these few minutes to go what will be happening. And also the question that Sami Kituku has also raised, that most people also are asking here themselves, is what will happen now that we are having 6 judges on the bench? What will be happening if we will have a tie? And I think, Maura, that one we will have to talk with our panel in the studio so that they can keep or put light on that, so that our residents here can have an information on what can happen if we can have a tie. Generally, Maura, we are waiting to see. It's a long wait, but as you know, it's a game of wait and see, so that at the end of the day, Kenyans will have to know which way, whichever the court or the judges will rule, and then Kenyans will have no option but to live by it. Maura.
Thank you so much, John Wanyama, for an update. And just to answer those who are asking, if there is a tie, that is 3 judges, for upholding the petition and 3 judges throwing out the petition, then it will be as if there was no petition to begin with, Wanyama, and President Uhuru Kenyatta will be sworn in next week. So that is what would happen if there is a tie. And of course, that's something I'll be discussing with my guests here in studio. John Wanyama giving us the latest update from Eldoret, Uasin Gishu County. Let's now cross over to Kisumu County, Kisumu City to be specific, where Laura Otieno is on standby. Laura, we had some reports of a bit of unrest in Kisumu yesterday. What can you tell us in terms of what are the facts? And also, of course, I'm sure Kisumu residents are following what is happening at the Supreme Court or what is expected to happen in the next 25 minutes or so. What can you tell us, Laura?
Yes, a very good morning to you, Waihiga. And here in Kisumu County, this morning so far, there's some there's some tension that is building up, of course, considering what happened yesterday, where there was a lorry that was torched at the Central Police Station. The lorry had knocked down one person and sped off towards Central Police Station before an angry mob chased the lorry down to that place and set it ablaze. Now, this morning, there were some youth that were around that burnt lorry. They were trying to take some parts of that lorry, but police came and dispersed that crowd at the Central Police, just outside the Central Police Station. But of course, in light of the Supreme Court ruling that is expected to be delivered about 30 minutes from now, there is some sort of people are waiting on that judgment so much, and following that, of course, considering what has been happening in terms of NASA's calls, well, Safaricom shops, interestingly, here in Kisumu, the CBD was on lockdown, and here where we are at right now, there is another Safaricom shop at that point where it's actually locked, and the businesses around that Safaricom shop are open. At the CBD, we saw Airtel and Telcom shops still operating. Banks along the street as well are still operating, but the Safaricom shops and this place, there are only two Safaricom shops in Kisumu town. This is this one here and another one along the Central Business District, which are on lockdown. But as you can see, there are pockets of traders that have kept their shops open, but also across the Central Business District, which is an area that was largely, can I say, infested during the previous Supreme Court ruling, with people who are celebrating that ruling. And Kisumu, Waihiga, having been an area that has witnessed has seen both sides of the ruling, considering 2013 and the September-August ruling that was delivered recently. It will be interesting to see what their reaction would be today. But of course, the people are anticipating the best. They're gathering around hotels, basically to be following that from the screen. But today, there is some significant less traffic. It's not a typical Monday morning. There are very few people in town compared to other Mondays. And police presence, we saw 2 police Land Cruisers basically patrolling to ensure that the security status is at par. But in Kondele, we understand that some tension is building up. There are pockets of youth that have gathered alongside the road, of course, all waiting for what will be said in the Supreme Court ruling. Waihiga.
Laura, briefly, what is the security situation now in Kisumu County? Have you seen a great number of police out there, or is it just like any regular day?
Well, there are 2 police Land Cruisers that we have seen today morning, but of course that is they are doing their usual security patrols. That has been the situation ever since the political temperature went down a little. We've seen, normally we see 2 police Land Cruisers, but today, usually comparing the situation today with what it was during when the ruling was last delivered, that's at some time early September, there was today there is less police presence, but of course yesterday as well, Waihiga, maybe if I could take you back, yesterday evening there were running battles between the youth and the police here. After that lorry was burnt down, there were tear gas canisters thrown at those people. So the police, they may be patrolling. First of all, the one we saw was at the Central Police Station, trying to disperse that crowd that was there, trying to take some parts of that burnt lorry. But we saw those 2 police Land Cruisers leave that place and do a patrol around town, all the areas through Stage and the Central Business District. But there's not heavy police presence as it was witnessed during the last ruling. Waihiga.
Well, thank you so much, Laura, for giving us the latest update from Kisumu City in Kisumu County, and just letting us know what's happening even as residents move to public areas to, get close to a TV screen as they await that Supreme Court judgment anytime from 10 o'clock in the next 20 minutes or so. Before we cross over to Nyeri County, let me introduce my guest in studio from the far right, Brian Weke, governance expert. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Once again, Lillian Mahiri Zaja, former IBC Vice Chairperson, thanks for finding time to be here with us. And Kaikai Kissinger, an advocate of the High Court, thank you for finding time to be here with us. I'll be discussing a little bit about what we can expect from the Supreme Court with them on the other side of this link. But let's first talk to Martin Munene in Nyeri County. Martin, a sad weekend for residents of Nyeri County as they laid their third governor to rest. But I'm sure all focus now is on the Supreme Court. What can you tell us from county number 19?
A very good morning from Nyeri County in this particular Monday, just days after the county laid to rest its third governor, Dr. Wahome Gakuru, a county that is struggling to move forward. But I must say that from the look of things, the county is slowly but surely moving forward with its fourth governor, who was sworn in last week, and he had a cabinet. And so I can say that the government of this county is intact as we speak. And so residents are just slowly moving on forward. And as you can see behind me, residents are out and going just about their normal businesses, even as their eyes and ears are in the Supreme Court, waiting the ruling of today's judgment, which would either uphold or throw away Uhuru Kenyatta's victory. But I must say, Wahiga Mwaura, that we've talked to residents this morning, and a lot of them saying that the most important thing for the Nyeri resident is peace, saying that lack of peace is affecting their businesses. I must say the bulk of the Nyeri residents are farmers, and their farm produce makes its way to Nairobi and other regions in the country. And so when there is absence of peace in those regions, then they suffer as farmers because they have nowhere to take their produce. And the people in the town are business people, most of them getting their products from Nairobi and other regions and bringing them to this particular county to sell to the residents. And therefore, once again, if there is no peace in those regions, then they suffer directly. And therefore, a lot of them saying whether this election is upheld or thrown away, then the most important thing is peace. They are longing they're looking forward to a situation whereby there'll be peace in the country and peace in this region, so that they can be able to move on with their lives. But a lot of them also expressing a lot of hope, really, because as you know, this is a region that came out in large numbers to vote for President Uhuru Kenyatta, and therefore, of course, they are hopeful that the election will be upheld. But they say either way, they are going to choose peace and they will remain peaceful. And that is how things are in this county. Back to you in studio, Wahiga.
Thank you, Martin Munene, for that update. Even as Nyeri residents continue to come to terms with the loss of their third governor, but also focus on matters at the Supreme Court. I'll also be giving you an update from Mombasa County shortly with Asha Bekidusa. But before that, let me quickly engage my guests here in studio. We keep looking at our watches, another 16 minutes or so, if the court will keep time, that is. Let me start with you, Brian. Experts saying that the ruling could go three ways. Number one, the court could agree with the petitioners, annul the poll, or throw out the petition so that President Uhuru Kenyatta would be sworn in probably next week, Tuesday, or uphold the election victory, but note with concerns the process. What's your take?
I think it can go either way. Those three scenarios are basically...
Could there be a fourth scenario somewhere in the back of your mind?
Actually, my own opinion is that if you read extensively about Supreme Courts internationally, they have two jurisdictions. One is actually a political jurisdiction, and another one is actually the legal jurisdiction. If you look at the Supreme Court ruling of the last election, they looked at evidence, issues, facts, issues of law, and they exercised their inherent legal jurisdiction. My opinion is that this particular Supreme Court will definitely exercise its inherent political jurisdiction. Even though law advocates like Donald Kipkorir have gone to social media to say, please do not get into the political game, just deal with the law itself. Ideally... You feel they'll not be able to escape that? Let's be very honest. Of course, lightning does not strike twice. My humble opinion is definitely the Supreme Court will opt for a political jurisdiction. And I can tell you for a fact, the issue here is not even whether they will annul the presidential election, because that I can tell you for a fact. If they exercise the political jurisdiction, they will not do that. But for me, as a lawyer and as an electoral expert, key things that need to happen, because, and that's one of the options you've actually said, that they will say, look here, there were grave issues, but those grave issues are not grave enough to nullify the presidential election, and moving forward, they have to give far-reaching recommendations as regards a number of things within this country. And one of those things is that, of course, there is very serious lacuna in law. For instance, issues to do with the fresh presidential poll. Still, if you look at the 2007 Supreme Court ruling, they tried to deal with a number of issues.
2007 or 2013?
2013.
Yes.
2013, sorry. They tried to deal with a number of issues. Parliament was meant to take up those issues, and they did not. So I think the Supreme Court, other than just annulling or upholding the election, they need to come up with very serious recommendations in terms of tightening our electoral processes in this country.
Okay. Lillian?
Yeah, I would also want to agree that it could go either way, because when we look at the context and where we are coming from, the earlier decision was very clear that the law was not followed. There were irregularities and illegalities. So we are going back. The court must again examine that context. Has it been complied with? The compliance with the Constitution, the compliance with the law are very critical. But again, when we look at the political environment, which is also very important in terms of the role of the Supreme Court, I would agree anything could happen, because we have seen after the earlier decision that the country was divided politically, definitely, because of the decision that was made. Now, coming back to what we're expecting today, again, we will see a country further divided. That is a fact.
No matter which way they
Yes,
rule.
no matter which way we go, and no matter how we look at it, because we have institutions at work now. We are testing our institutions. We've gone back to tell the IEBC, you have not complied with the law. You have not complied with the Constitution. So go back and look at the irregularities, look at the illegalities, and conform. And now we are coming back to say, okay, IEBC has defended itself. We saw that. And they've said they've done everything to prepare themselves for the election they conducted on the 26th. But now we are looking again at the political environment. Has it changed? No. There is a likelihood it may get better. It may get some instability. So, and that is a role the Supreme Court must play very, very critically.
The Supreme Court has no options in which it can pull a sort of a rabbit out of the hat, a solution that would allay the fears of both political sides. That's not possible at this moment.
That is not possible, definitely.
Some sort of Solomonic wisdom that
at
will
our context,
stand all of...
it is impossible.
We are laughing on a very serious matter. Kai Kissinger, come in.
Thank you very much. I think we need to understand why the Supreme Court exists in the first place. And I do appreciate what my colleagues have talked about. And we must then ask ourselves, why were parties before the Supreme Court and what they were seeking for in the Supreme Court? You know, you can't get what you did not ask for. So when you look at when you look at the Constitution and when you look at the Supreme Court Act and also the Supreme Court rules, it's very clear the mandate of what the Supreme Court is supposed to do in terms of dealing with such kind of a case. And what they are supposed to be doing is basically to make a decision based on law and also based on fact. Now, that's what I'm expecting. I'm expecting then the Supreme Court to look at what is the law, what is the law saying, what were the facts that were presented before it, because people went to court and sought for some orders to be done, and then the court will be answering those issues that were framed by the advocates, because there are about 5 or 6 issues that were framed, and when they were consolidated, they were left to about 4 of them. So the court must answer those issues. So it's completely unlikely that the political thing will take precedence over the law. What I expect, therefore, is that, yes, I agree to the extent that Supreme Courts all over the world take a political decision, because there are sometimes then you have to ask yourself as a court, are we looking at the legal or the political or a merge of both?
Do you think the September 1st judgment was a political solution or a political judgment?
It was, and I'm coming to that. You know what is
nodding her head.
I'm coming to that actually, and I wouldn't want to say that beforehand. What is before this petition right now is what we call a qualitative test, as opposed to what was before the previous decision. The previous decision was a merger between qualitative test and quantitative test. So this time is more of a qualitative test. So the Supreme Court is now seeking and sitting and looking at the issues that were discussed before them and asking themselves what was the environment before the election. Was it void? Was there violence? Was the environment okay? Did the IEBC do their work? And when you look at what we call the qualitative test in law, is what now came out with the issues that were framed by the lawyers. So then the Supreme Court is now more of refined and only going to consider more of the qualitative test as opposed to quantitative test. The issues of numbers is not here nor there in this kind of petition. So I think what the Supreme Court is going to do right now is to really answer those questions that were framed by the lawyers, that the Supreme Court agreed on. And therefore, I see more of the law taking precedence and the application of the Constitution vis-a-vis the other electoral laws taking more precedence, and I see more of the what were the environment prior to the petition. If, for example, you look at the question of the 290 constituencies, which is an issue before the Supreme Court, whereby we are saying that the election was not done in all the 290 and 25 of them were missed out. Now, the Supreme Court will be now with a task to explain why the IEBC has to take a day if they were able to say that, look, we tried our level best, but we couldn't deliver the election. On the other hand, the other parties are saying, look, it's the responsibility of IEBC to deliver the other election. So you see it's more of a qualitative nature in terms of the approach of the judgment.
Okay, I'll be coming back to you because we need to cross over to Mombasa County. Can we now get Asha Bekidusa to give us an update on the expectations of Mombasa residents, Mombasa City? Asha, I trust you can hear me loud and clear. What can you tell us what Mombasa residents doing? Are they keenly focusing on what's happening at the Supreme Court? Tell us an update, please.
Very good morning to you, Waihiga. I'm coming to you live from Mombasa in Majengo. And people are very anxious waiting for the Supreme Court ruling, which is expected in a few hours' time. And aside from that, maybe Wahiga, a little update from this county is that the former Mombasa Senator, Mother Hassan Omar, has passed away in Mombasa Hospital. She has passed on after a little illness, and she is expected to be laid to rest today at Mazurui Cemetery later in the afternoon at 4 p.m. And basically, to come back to the Supreme Court ruling, is that residents of Mombasa are very anxious waiting for the Supreme Court decision. And earlier I had talked to few of them, and they're saying that at the end of the day, what they want is justice should prevail from the Supreme Court judges. Wahiga.
Thank you very much, Asha Bekidusa, for that update. My guests here in studio have continued to hold discussions even during that break. Brian, you're advancing a different narrative from what Kaikai Kissinger feels. I can give you a chance now to bring us to the floor.
Kaikai is my senior. I understand where he's coming from. You know, as an advocate and as a lawyer, it is important to believe in the law, to believe in aspects of the law, to believe in the academic exercise of the law. But you know, this is a reality. And let's be extremely honest. The issues that have been framed and have been agreed on as major issues, they do not necessarily have to annul the presidential election. Issues to do with what does a fresh election mean is a separate issue. And that ordinarily would not annul the election that was conducted. Issues of nomination procedure in case of a fresh election. Issues to do with, in the event a candidate withdraws. Issues to do with the 290 constituencies. Those are very serious issues that we need to agree and chart a way forward as a country, but those issues do not necessarily have a bearing on the outcome of the election.
Even if we know that this is a court that is very concerned about the process, not just the actual election day and declaration thereafter. They've stated time and time again that we also really will be looking at the process. If they were to do this again, don't you think some of the issues you've raised would be of concern to them?
And that is why I'm saying, ideally, if we ought to follow the law, then the Supreme Court actually should nullify the election, because those procedures are extremely important.
And again, we don't know if they will. No, unless you seem to know something that we don't know.
That's what I'm trying to tell you, that if Supreme Court would focus on their legal jurisdiction, then ideally, because of those procedures and processes, and they were very clear in the last petition, they said, you go and conduct fresh elections, you have to conduct it within the law, the constitution, and laws as well, yes, and written laws. So ideally, if they were to follow that particular decision, and that means that they will follow their legal jurisdiction, then ideally they need to nullify the election.
Okay.
And that's what I'm telling you, that chances are very high that they will not use their inherent legal jurisdiction, but they'll focus on the political one. And that is what I'm arguing here. And I would want to agree with Kakai Kissinger, because he's a real
and if I can just interrupt you, just to tell our viewers that the images you're seeing on your screen were taken a couple of minutes ago. We can see Francis Gashuri confirmed that the Chief Justice has arrived at the Supreme Court. And so those are some of the pictures that we are bringing to you now. That happened a couple of minutes ago. You want phrasing a message to Kai Kissinger? No, before I interrupted you.
I was just saying that my senior believes in the law. And again, and that's why we were saying, if they actually follow their legal jurisdiction, then ideally you can see clearly there are very grave issues
that will need to be looked at.
Absolutely.
But you're concerned that due to other considerations, they may not. Lillian?
Correct.
Yeah, when we look at the proceedings that are leading to the ruling of 1st of September, the court came out strongly that it's about process. And the numbers were not really important. So they went back, and that's why they threw back the ball to IEBC. But now when we're coming back to re-examine what has happened so far, I would want to say that, yes, there is now a heavier mandate on the Supreme Court to not only look at those processes, which have come out in the issues that have been framed, like if you're talking of nominations, is it a prerequisite to the fresh elections? And if you're looking again at other issues like the effect of a candidate's withdrawal, is that important? Would that affect the process? So you see, when you look at some of these issues and unpack them, or unpackage them and put them aside, then you must look at the other context, the political context, as Weke is saying. If that political context and looked at and balancing the scales, looked at with the law and the constitution, would that fit to vitiate, would those processes vitiate as having a free and fair election that would stand the test of the constitution? So again, this is again a question of balancing the acts, balancing the scales for the Supreme Court, and I would say the political equation is very important.
The political equation is very important. One body that is clearly watching this petition judgment today will be the IEBC, and I want to ask you, Lillian, what is the way forward for the IEBC depending on how the court rules? If the court upholds the election, then I guess the IEBC, it will be all clear for them and they can carry on with their mandate. But if the court then agrees with the petitioner and throws out or annuls the October 26th election, then how would IEBC operate moving forward? A body that oversaw two presidential elections that were nullified by the Supreme Court, how would that then work?
Whichever way you look at it, whether they validate or invalidate the election, there's still a lot of work for the commission to do. Remember, this is a process. We've been undertaking reform processes for quite a while now. Since 2007, there are many things we've been undertaking. And from 2013, we put in place structures that are still new, structures that are being tested, and systems that are being tested. So again, when we look at what we did on 26th, again, the IEBC had to go back and relook into the same issue of the forms. The forms has always been a very delicate and dicey issue, because as we said, when we go to polls, it's always a smooth process. Issues start thereafter. When we start the counting, the tallying, the verification.
That is where the issue.
Yes. So we will still have to go back to the drawing board, whichever way.
You actually believe IEBC can soldier on if this election, the October 26th one, is invalidated? You think they have the ability to carry on?
Okay, as an institution, they will have to go back to the drawing board. Even the country will have to go back to the drawing board and look at what kind of commission do we want. Is this the commission we want? What do we have to change to make it work for everybody?
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
We have to go back.
I think my issue is IEBC is on trial. And IEBC is on trial in the sense that the first election was invalidated, nullified, and there were some gaps that were identified that IEBC probably missed out. And that was the whole debate of the issue of the process. Now, as right now, as we go into this second bite, we want to find out whether really IBC will come out strong or not. Remember that IBC, the chairman released almost 10 points clarifying what efforts they are doing in terms of to fix the problem as we go into the next election. But I think we shouldn't also be very harsh on IBC, in the sense that IBC is working in a certain context. Whatever we are doing, since these are independent institutions, we look at the context in which they are working under. Because if you notice one thing, that Kenya, we have very good laws in terms of electoral processes and election engineering. So we have amended our laws, we've changed our laws, we've done it, because we've gone through a lot of petitions since 1992, petitions. And all these petitions that we have filed, so far we have done about 9 petitions in this country. We've learned lessons out of them, and they have reformed our laws. When you look at the opposition, when you look at the government, they have all participated, and members of parliament have participated in reforming the electoral process and electoral reforms. We've had so many changes in IBC. So I'm not so worried about the law that leads us into the electoral processes, or I'm not so worried about the institution. I'm just worried about the political will that this institution should continue to have in order to lead us through the electoral process.
You say that we've been too harsh on the IBC, but then there are others who say if the IBC had done their job properly, the nation would not be where it is right now. What do you say to them?
I don't.
And that is the body that could have provided clarity if they conducted the August 8th poll in the manner with which they conducted the October 26th one. There would have been less issues for the Supreme Court to thus make their decision.
Exactly. I agree to that extent, but you see, no, we are all human beings, and we make mistakes, and we are all bound to make mistakes, because Commissioner was in IBC, for example, and probably there are challenges that IBC was undergoing during that time. So mistakes are there, they are made, but we have to correct them when they do happen. And
should people be made to pay for their mistakes?
We are always meant to correct these mistakes. But remember the circumstance under which...
Who should pay for those mistakes?
Unfortunately, Kenyans taxpayers have to do it, unfortunately. Now, but remember one thing, my brother, is that IBC also was working under very difficult circumstances. We must also understand the conditions under which they are working. They are faced with so many cases to deal with, and challenges were there, and there was a new IBC. And I'm not here holding fort for IBC because they're not here.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yes, I'm not holding fort for IBC because they're not here, but as a Kenyan, they also had some challenges. And these challenges were identified in the Supreme Court. We've gone back. So let's hope that this time round, when the Supreme Court makes the decision, IBC will come a little bit out clean in terms of explanation of what did not work and what has worked now.
Okay, Brian.
I think this IBC is the most incompetent commission that we've seen. We thought Zajans was worse, but this one, to be honest, they've had a number of chain of blunders. Of course, when the Supreme Court nullified the election, they said you go back and conduct fresh elections. What did they do? They went back, sat, interpreted the judgment of 2013 and decided that it will only be Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta. Then, when they were posed with a challenge where Raila Odinga has resigned and decided not to run, if you look at that ruling, the next paragraph said that clearly they have to conduct fresh nominations. Now, after using the same decision of 2013 to come up with a decision within the commission, then when they were posed with another challenge, which is provided for in that particular petition, and decision, they moved away from it and said, look here, again when Ekuro went to court, and Ekuro went as in his own merit, and the court decided that he be included. What did they do? They said, now look here, why don't we include everybody else? So they've had a number of chain of blunders. We saw the memo from the chairman, which raised a number of fundamental issues.
Although they were struck out of this judgment,
that's when I knew this petition has collapsed. Once the judges decided that that petition is not part of the evidence, that memo, because it raised a number of fundamental issues.
So for you, issues like the gazettement of Jirongo, despite ballot papers being printed in Dubai, is one of the issues.
There are so
that
many
worried you.
Absolutely, that's just one of the issues. When the memo leaked, and the chairman is on record that it is actually he wrote the memo. Madam Vice Chair will tell you that one of the key issues for a commission is actually confidence levels. Other than just running elections, your confidence level as an institution, and more so as IEBC, is extremely important. So if you come up with a memo that raises a number of fundamental issues, and that is shared with the public, then you don't come back as a commission and say, we have dealt with this way, and this way. Then the credibility of that institution is definitely battered.
Lillian, you have been mentioned a little bit, even as he spoke. I can give you a chance to respond now.
I think we need to re-examine ourselves as a country and our culture. We've just seen what's happening in Zimbabwe, and we thought the country would explode. And I've been listening to commentaries on international media and, you know, coming from right inside Zimbabwe, and people saying we do not have a culture of violence. People are patient there. They've been patient for those 37 years of dictatorship.
And a few more days now, it seems.
And a few more days they might have to wait. And they're patient. But when we come back to our context, our political context, I'm reminded of what Kriegler said. You cannot expect to have a credible election in a poisoned environment. And this is what IEBC has to deal with over and over again. Every time we prepare, or they prepare rather, for elections, they always have to deal with the bigger elephant in the room, that they will not please anybody. Of course, as an arbiter and playing by the rules of neutrality and impartiality, they are not there to please anybody. They are only accountable to the people of Kenya. It is a tightrope where they will not please anybody, but they will always be vilified. So whichever way, whether they do or not, they are damned. And, you know, they get condemnations in equal measures. So I think we need to re-examine ourselves, our culture, our political culture. We are trying to build institutions, yet these institutions are not allowed to thrive in an environment where they can grow. So we take 2 steps forward and we have to go another step back. And this is why all the reforms that were started, even by the IEC, have been clawed back to some extent, because now, see, 2013 we come in, we have reforms, we have an election, but we still have to go back. This time round, as you said, and I will tell you, the IEBC must still go back to the drawing board, whichever way, whether the election is upheld or invalidated, they must still go back to the drawing board and look at their processes again.
We had seen a chairperson immediately after the resignation and exit of Dr. Roslyn Akombe, who looked on the brink of resignation. In fact, in his statement, I think on the same day or the next, actually it was the same day, I believe, that news leaked that she had left, he read a statement that seemed to, the last line seemed to almost say, it is for that reason that I can no longer carry on. But he never read it. Similar to what many were waiting to hear from Mugabe yesterday, but it's like there was one line that was missing. That nevertheless is something that cannot escape people's minds, that no matter how many times after that IEBC assured the nation that we're still in control, many still recall that statement by the chairperson. How do you reconcile those facts?
For me, it speaks volumes about the political pressure that goes with that job. You may want to do the right thing, you may sit there and want to observe the rule of law, obey the constitution, but the political pressure, because you know whichever way you go, you might slip somewhere. So this is why I think the chairman came up with that kind of a statement. But I think that was
a disclaimer?
A disclaimer that was, to me, a bit irresponsible, because you
on his part,
it was irresponsible, because as somebody who is accountable to the people, he does not owe allegiance to any political party. He must not please any political party. So that was very responsible. Kenyans were waiting to hear that, you know, the election commission, the electoral commission has now fully prepared, is fully prepared for the next election. But here we are with a chairman who is almost teetering on resigning, which is not good for the 40 million Kenyans who are waiting to go back to the polls. So that was irresponsible. But that speaks to the political pressure that we find ourselves in as a country, and even the political environment that we operate under.
Okay, well, those are your views, although there are those who feel that Dr. Roslyn Akombe is a hero for what she did, and again, everyone is allowed the opinion on this matter. Kakai,
let me just take you through a little bit of, sometimes it's good to talk about history and to know where we are coming from as a country in terms of reforming the IEBC. You recall the Kivuitu Commission. Now, the Kivuitu Commission was not an independent commission. It was quasi-government at that time. And they messed the election at that time. And
ECK.
we also, the ECK, the Electoral Commission of Kenya, which was chaired by the late Samuel Kivito, and may his soul rest in peace. And they made mistakes, and we Kenyans came out in large numbers and said, no, we must reform the independent the ECK. In reforming the ECK, we went through various reforms, and those were some of the reforms under the Agenda 4. Then there was that interim IEC that was formed to transit from the ECK to the now IEBC. Then we came up with, after the IEC was formed, we came up with very competitive ways and means of reforming or of appointing commissioners who then will go and work in IEBC. During the ECK time, appointees to that commission was presidential appointees. So then the issues of independence was completely compromised. So then we came up with a panel of experts, or we are calling them panel of something, to appoint the commissioner. So the laws were changed. The laws changed, we reformed the institution. We say the best way to reform this institution is to have independent commissioners who are then appointed and vetted, applied through public, you are vetted in parliament, and then you are appointed. So when then the Hassan Commission was then formed, where my good friend Lilian Mairi was the vice chair, was very competitive. I do recall that time I was actually applying to be a commissioner with the IEBC, and I do recall the interviews we went through, thorough interviews prior to appointment. And
live on TV, I believe.
And live on TV, and I was applying. I was by then seeking to become a commissioner, and so it was very competitive. When they got into office, we said, okay, fine, the law is in your favor. Do what you have to do, because you are an independent commission, and we even changed the name from Electoral Commission to IEBC. Now we are calling it IEBC. We kept changing the names, and we said the law is in your favor, do your thing. They did what they did. Okay, and I'll never fault the Hassan Commission. They did what they did. They had their own challenges, which is normal. Then after that, we kicked them out. We said, we don't want these people, let them go. We gave them a package, they went, and we brought in the Jebukati-led commission. The law hasn't changed. They are still operating on the same law. What I am communicating and saying here is that we have independent institutions. We have the proper legal framework that can handle or manage us through the election. We do not have political will as Kenyans to say, we have appointed Lilian Zaja Mahiri as a commissioner, let her work. I don't want to appoint Lilian Mahiri as a commissioner. There, after 2 years, I kick out Lilian Mahiri and say, no, Lilian, I don't trust you. Yet we went through a very tough vetting process. So what we are missing in the institution is the political will. And this political will is what the commission is talking about, which comes from political sides.
Is that political will what led to the nullification of the August 8th poll? Because if you're saying that IEBC is independent, did its role, then why did the Maraga-led court annul the August 8th election, if not for the what Brian is calling the incompetence of the electoral board?
You know, sometimes it's very easy to criticize when you are not in there. We are saying IEBC made mistakes, and these mistakes have been identified by the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court at that time said the entire mistake that IEBC made was process-led. So there were mistakes. IEBC came out defending themselves. They came in late. You know, they had only 6 months to do the election. They came up with a lot of defense. So that's why I'm saying they made mistakes. These mistakes have been corrected. That is why this ruling is very critical for us to see whether actually IEBC has reformed within the time the election was dismissed and now, and whether they have done process according to the law.
Okay. Brian, let me come to you. There was a question that was raised in Eldoret, Uasin Gishu County, the possibility of a tie. And of course, that would mean that status quo remains. The petition would be thrown out. With 6 judges on the bench, that does seem a possibility?
Maybe just before I answer that, Kissinger has taken us through a number of processes, history of where we've come from. And every time we make one step ahead, again, we take another back step.
Or 2 or 3.
Or 2 or 3. If you look at the procedures and processes that we've gone through to reform our electoral system, including institutions, again, just before election, if you saw how Hassan-led commission were interviewed in public, and of course the president did not have a hand in determining who becomes the commissioner, because ideally it was just given a name. Now, the Orengo and the Mudhama-led committee, the bipartisan committee, actually again amended the law and provided for the president to have a hand in appointing commissioners. You remember they amended the law and said the president will be issued with 3 names. Based on those, he will now determine who becomes. Again, that leaves the commission to be under control of the executive. And we were very clear, because then I was the chairman of the Election Observation Group. And I think we sent a very clear petition to Parliament. So again, institutionally, we make very good progress, and we claw back this. Absolutely. So ideally, one of the key things that needs to come out of this verdict, and Maura, you've noticed the issue of nullification or upholding is not my issue in this panel.
Right.
The issue that we need to look at is that the Supreme Court, in the long judgment that they'll give later, not now, is that they need to come up with very well thought out determination of a number of issues as regards electoral processes in our country, so that once and for all we deal with these issues.
Should they have done that earlier, after the September 1st judgment? Would they have made what we are going through easier if they had issued very strict guidelines with timelines, etc., of what they expect to see, rather than 2 or 3 lines saying go and carry out a fresh election in conformance with the Constitution and applicable electoral laws? Should they have done more than that? Should they have gone to specifics?
You see, Supreme Court, in its role, they're not the election management body.
But you're asking them right now to become that. Ideally,
because now they clearly said that you should conduct elections. This is the threshold. And because they did not, now, we've come to realize that after they nullified, there are a number of things that are not even provided for in our law, including what happens in the event that a candidate withdraws, in the event that there are a number of very gray areas. The candidate
is declared bankrupt.
Absolutely. There are a number of gray areas, and I think it is important. Again, of course, it is not the role of the Supreme Court to again create laws. Their work is to interpret and recommend for Parliament to actually come up with very succinct laws that will be able to carry this country
just
forward.
In line with something that you've said, someone on social media at Bernice Nyanyamwa says, if the Supreme Court nullifies this election, they must go beyond just ordering a fresh election. They must dictate how the fresh election is to be conducted. So it seems that there are those who have the same school of thought as you, Brian. Lillian, you can also just weigh in on all this. And again, we don't know how the Supreme Court will rule. No one here has claimed to be a prophet. At least I believe so. And we need to wait. 10 o'clock is in the next... Actually, we're past 10 o'clock. We're well into 10 o'clock. So any minute now, we expect those 6 judges to walk from their chambers into this court and take their positions, and from there, give Kenyans the way forward. But nevertheless, we can't talk about the consequences of different judgments, and one in which, if they decide to agree with the petitioner and invalidate the election, then what sort of recommendations should the court, give? Because that's what many people are asking.
I would want to agree that the court has the duty to interpret the law and make it clear. And I think what we have seen, and why I would agree with my colleagues here, is that there were gaps in terms of who was to run in the election. Because if you look at Article 138, it is clear what needs to happen in a presidential election. But when you look at 140 is just clear that if the court invalidates an election, then we go for a fresh election without any elaborating anything. But 138 lays out that if a candidate, if an election is not upheld, then who goes back and what happens. So 140 does not go to that extent of giving any guideline in terms of those specifics. And those are the areas where we have the gaps. And even when you go to the elections law, you cannot now presume or infer that this is what was intended from, looking at Article 140. But what is there is that IEBC has a constitutional mandate. Okay, I'll have to interrupt you on that note. I'm coming back to you because we need to quickly talk to Hassan Mugambi in Githurai. He's been monitoring the security situation there. Hassan, social media awash with reports that some of the unrest we saw over the weekend carried on into the night in Githurai. What can you tell us as the facts?
Well, thank you very much, Wahiga. It is the Githurai roundabout here at Githurai area of Nairobi County, where there was a bit of attention yesterday when a section of border operators here protested on this particular stretch of the road. As you can see, the tarmac road is still a bit black with soot from burning tires that ensued here yesterday, and this section of the road was actually blocked with them demonstrating against what they termed impunity and atrocity committed on one of their own. Remember, a border was burnt down in Babadogo area when there were a bit of skirmishes there. They're saying that that particular border operator is from this area, and they were calling on the security apparatus to just draw their attention to that particular incident there, and that is why they were on the road. But right now, everything is back into normal. This is a very vibrant stage in across the streets of Nairobi, and yes, we are waiting, and actually they are waiting for the verdict that is going to be delivered in a matter of minutes at this Supreme Court, and see whether or not President Uhuru Kenyatta will be handed the the go-ahead or the green light, rather, to get to serve the rest of the term, or are we going back to yet another election? That is also what they are waiting for here. I spoke to some of them, and yes, they are saying they're anxiously waiting for the verdict by the Supreme Court. Wahiga.
Hassan Mugambi, you may have already alluded to this, but give us an update on the security situation there. Can you see police officers in clear sight, or could it pass off as a regular business day there at that market?
Yes, there was a bit of police presence in the morning, but right now they have, I think, retreated back to base, or rather being on standby from afar. But then again, business has bounced back to normal here at the Githurai area of Nairobi County.
Well, thank you so much, Hassan Mugambi, for that update. Just letting us know the latest from Githurai, specifically at the Githurai roundabout, which of course anyone who's heading to Thika, etc. would need to pass through. And of course there's some sort of intersection there where you can access different parts just from that one point, and he's letting us know that business has started. It's a Monday morning, but at the same time, some security presence, some increased security presence had been spotted in terms of police a bit earlier on, but that is not the case right now. Thank you, Hassan Mugambi, for that update. We are also live from the Supreme Court. We are waiting any minute now for the 6-judge bench to, to the 6 judges to walk out of their chambers and read their judgment. As to whether it will be one judgment or different judgments, that we will have to wait and see. Many expect a summarized reading, and then thereafter, within the next 28 days or so, the more comprehensive one will be issued. We hope to get an update from Francis Gashuri and Sam Gituku any minute now, but Lilian, I had interrupted you. I can give you a chance to carry on right now.
Yeah, I was talking about the gaps that there are in terms of looking at Article 140. For instance, we've already discussed about is nominations, or are nominations, a prerequisite? What is the effect of a candidate, a major candidate, withdrawing? And in this instance, we saw the arguments that were in court. But in terms of the other processes and preparedness for the election, IEBC must follow the Constitution. It must follow the electoral laws, the relevant electoral laws, and of course exercise what we may call legally administrative discretion, so that they do everything not just strictly following the law, but having the leeway to do things that would correct, or at least focus on bringing some semblance of order in terms of looking at the irregularities that were pointed out and the illegalities.
A lot of people have spoken about the same thing that you're saying right now. IEBC must follow the law, and you expect that they are guided on how to follow the law by their legal teams. But the chairperson stated that he feels that he has been misled at times by some members of the legal team. How do you reconcile that sort of confusion when you have different legal minds giving different messages about the same constitution, for example?
It's unfortunate
and how did your commission handle it?
I'm laughing because it's unfortunate that some of these things that should be happening behind closed doors come out to the open. And those things must happen behind closed doors because they are sensitive. You have a legal team that you're supposed to discuss with and thrash the issues before you come out to tell the public what action you are taking. And again, the commission on its own can seek advice from the Attorney General, can seek the interpretation from the courts. So there are other avenues which the commission can use to ensure that whatever decision that it arrives at, it really is solid and robust under the law. So I think, again, I would say very responsible of a chairperson to do that. However, I would go back to the same issue that where there are gaps, then the Supreme Court must step in to ensure that those gaps are actually filled, the lacunas in the law are filled, because these are not things we expected. Remember, this is a constitution which is still undergoing a process of testing. So we are now realizing that, oh, this is not even provided for under the constitution. Yet we have an election, we have a fresh election under Article 140, but we don't know how this fresh election should be conducted. How should we go about when it comes to a candidate withdrawing? We do not know what is supposed to happen. Then these are some of the things going forward will have to be addressed. If the constitution is reopened one day, we will have to go back and look at them and see what needs to happen in terms of reforms.
Okay, Kissinger, come in.
I think the biggest challenge we found ourselves, and I tend to agree with Commissioner, the biggest challenge we find ourselves in was the question that the IEBC's lawyers, the first team of IEBC lawyers, had an opportunity to have clarity in terms of interpretation. You know, when you look at the Supreme Court Act and the Supreme Court rules, there's a requirement there of what they call advisory opinion. At that time, when they thought the ruling was not, or the judgment was not clear, they ought to have gone back to court and seek for clarity in terms of what is the advisory opinion. When the judgment was being made by the Supreme Court all said, go back, do the election, but follow the law. So they assumed that IEBC and this team of lawyers will advise IEBC properly what to do with the law. So that's why, for me, the question of nomination right now, which is now a question before the court of law, should have not been in the first place an issue to have come back to court. So I think the issue was they never sought clarity in terms of what is really a fresh election. They never went back to court. They never probably sought the opinion of the Attorney General, the way Commissioner is talking about. So there was a challenge there. So the question is how then were they able to navigate around these issues? But then I realized much later that most of them were dropped. So they have a new team of lawyers on the IEBC in the current petition. But then that is the basic challenge that probably might have happened.
Okay, I don't think I'll allow any of my other guests to speak now. Let's cross over immediately to the Supreme Court and listen to their judgment as they stream in now. Everyone has stood up in respect.